before we got on here, we talked about what would make this powerful. And you said, diving into personal authenticity, really, diving into more personal matters. I'm curious, when was the most pain that you faced emotionally and internally in the last decade? Was it during the pandemic? Was it when you were on, The Office? Was it after The Office? Was it before then? When was the time where you felt like maybe I should be really happy, but actually I'm going through some challenge, some suffering, some identity crisis?
I love that question. I love that question. I really, really love that
Let's
question.
Let's go, baby. Let's go, baby.
I will say that so many lights went off in my brain when you asked me that. And because I think it's really important, if you're seeking greatness, it's super important to say, like you said, to try and be authentic. I was not always authentic. I was a bullshit artist.
Really?
Through most of my life. I was an addict. I was a people pleaser. I just wanted to entertain. I was like the class clown. I just wanted people to like me. And I was in constant comparison with other people. So that's something that I've struggled with.
Really?
And it really is trying to bring as much authenticity and integrity to my interactions as possible, and to be vulnerable. Because if you want greatness, and I've just been reading and listening to your book and really enjoying it, and I'm going to switch the complimentary tables on you and just say, what I love about your book is there's no bull, and here are like takeaways. Like you want to do this? Here's what to do. Nothing vague in the book at all. Like, here's hooks you can hang your hat on. And I just picture like some young dude trying to make a difference, and your book is like a Bible, and I really mean that. I've read a lot of like books that are, I won't say that it's not self-help, but like motivational, like motivational kind of leadership, entrepreneurship, or whatever. Yours is bigger than that. And I really appreciate that. But I do think that when we talked right before the interview, I was saying like, sometimes messages don't get through unless you're really vulnerable and unless you're just as real as possible, because there's a lot of those folks out there aspiring to some kind of greatness and some kind of motivation and leadership that are struggling.
Yeah.
And they have character defects, and they get sad some days. And some days they wake up and they don't want to do a cold plunge at 6 a.m. and they don't want to do a Tony Robbins 3-hour workout and like a Mark Wahlberg
4 a.m.
4 a.m. Yeah. Like protein all day. Like it's hard, So I think it's important to talk about like the struggle. So you're leading off with the struggle. So
when was the time that was the hardest for you?
Well,
in the last decade.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. You let me. I'm gonna get
Simmer
there.
on it. I got you.
I'm there. But I will say that two things before the last decade. So my wife and I have had a lot of struggles and a lot of ups and downs over the years. That was some hard stuff, but that was thankfully a while back. But also, like, and I've been thinking about this too. Like when I was on The Office, and I had been acting for 15 years professionally. And then all of a sudden I was on The Office. We almost got canceled like a dozen different times. And then all of a sudden we take off, we win the Emmy, we're a top 10 show. It becomes, everyone is getting movie deals out of it. And I remember back to that time and how kind of sick I was that I didn't have the spiritual tools that I needed and the psychological tools and resilience that I needed to go through that. Fame is a very weird thing. That'll fuck you up, number one. Number two, I wasn't happy with what I had. I mean, like, to go from total obscurity to be kind of a weird looking, goofy character actor and all of a sudden get the role of a lifetime and be lauded and loved and winning awards and whatnot. Like, that's enough, Rainn. If I could go back in time to those early years of The Office, 2006, 7, 8. And I was like, but I want more. I want a movie career like Jack Black has, or Will Ferrell, or I want, this, or I want my own media company, or I want my own success here. I want my own development deal here. I want to be the spokesperson for this. Like, I want more money here. Like what when is it enough? Like, when is it ever just enough? And I wish I could have just taken a deep breath and be like, this is enough. This is great. I get to do 22 episodes a year, this amazing character. I'm making a really nice living. I won't say like I've made it. I want to do more creatively and from a business standpoint, but I wish. So when you asked me that, I think about those really troubled times that I should have been enjoying, and I wasn't able to go to gratitude. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed my time on the set and with the cast. They were amazing, and we all got along great, and I love each and every one of them. We were like this wonderful family. We weren't even a dysfunctional family. We were a pretty functional family.
Right.
Like, we'd come in every day and we would make comedy and get along and high five each other and eat too much from craft services. But yeah, so I was thinking about that, but then I'm gonna go there. And there's a chapter in the book, and it's called Death and How to Live It. And my dad dying 2.5 years ago, right after COVID started, was really devastating for me. My mom left me and my dad when I was about 1.5 years. So I stayed with him my whole life. So my primary bond, I didn't get to know my mom until I was like 15. So my primary bond was with my dad. He was always there for me. We had our ups and downs. We had our struggles, and we bumped heads a lot, and we didn't see eye to eye a lot. But it was really devastating at a core level to lose him, and it kind of shifted a lot of things about my perspective about life.
What was the biggest lesson he taught you while he was here, and the biggest lesson he's taught you since transitioning into a different way?
You're going to make me cry, Lewis. I will say that 2 lessons. One is, my dad, when he came into a room, always made it a better place. He would always have a positive thing to say. He would always uplift someone. He would tell a joke. He would inspire. He would compliment, like, that's a great jacket. And, oh, I love your office. And, oh, the light bulbs are great. And so nice to meet you guys behind the camera. Where are you from? Like, he always had some way to uplift every room he came in. And you know what? And again, I didn't really appreciate that until he was gone. And when I was thinking about eulogizing him, I was like, what is the single thing that if I could point to one thing that my dad did consistently that made the world a better place, it was he uplifted every room he went into. And that was really special. Sometimes I'm able to do that, but sometimes and the other thing, and I put the inscription of my book, and I said, dedicated to my father, and I said, thanks for teaching me about the soul. And I feel like my dad had a deep understanding from his faith that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that our reality is spiritual. We are heart-based beings, and we are in this physical world. We get 80 or 90 years. He got 79 years to go around the sun and to do the best with what we got and to try and leave the world a little bit better than when we came into it. And that perspective has stayed with me my whole life. And I went through a time when I was an atheist and I had rejected faith and all of that nonsense and, you know, religious BS and whatnot. I didn't want anything to do with that for a good 1.5 decades. But I did always kind of keep with me that idea that we are essentially are spiritual beings.
That's beautiful. What would you say that's the biggest lesson he's taught you since transitioning?
Well, that lesson was driven home when I saw him on the table of a hospital bed, and it was just like one of those medical shows where they were doing open heart surgery.
Oh, man.
And he had to do quadruple bypass, and they have to take a vein to put it in, and they couldn't find a vein that wasn't affected by his arterial sclerosis. So he was 12 hours and they couldn't save him.
Oh, man.
And
you were there for it?
yeah. Yeah.
like in parts of it or a couple
Well,
minutes here and there?
it was the weirdest thing because it was during COVID. You could only have one guest, one visitor. So I went in the morning before the surgery and we hung out for like an hour. I was sure he was going to, this operation has a 90%, 95% success rate.
So you're like, I'll see him soon.
I'll see you soon.
Wow.
And I literally hugged him. We were visiting. I was like, you're going to be great, Dad. Love you. I went and played pickleball.
Wow.
I went to Hobby Lobby and got some supplies. And then all of a sudden we're like, wonder how that's going. And then we got a very concerned call at like 12 or 1 o'clock. And we're like, oh. And then we had to wait another 6 hours before we kind of found out the situation. And, but he was still barely alive, but losing his blood pressure. And he had some kind of blood sepsis. And it was the kind of thing of like deciding to essentially unplug him. But the doctor was like, listen, he's going to be dead within the hour. And it was like one of those hospital shows where it's like squeaky doctor shoes on the linoleum floor. And
white coats, gloves,
beeping
and
machines, and beep, beep. And that ventilator is going,
no way.
And it was incredibly sad. It was weeping. But what is the kind of bounty that comes out of it? What's the takeaway? His body is lying there on the table, and I see little things about him, the way his hair sticks up here and there, and the way his ears are, and his kind of ruddy cheeks, and his kind of old man hands, and it hit me like, oh, that's not my father. That's not my father. That is the vessel that carried my father for 79 years. I'm looking at this vessel once the heart had stopped. But that's not the reality of who he is. And that goes hand in hand with that lesson. So that's what he's kind of taught me upon his passing. Again, just really solidified that the light that we all have, the emotion, the love that we bring, the spirit that we bring to interacting with one another, that's our reality. This body houses us, and we should take care of it and maximize it and love it, and it's part of who we are, but it's not all of who we are.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting. I lost my dad last year, and it's been an interesting year of knowing that he's no longer physically in this world. I don't know if that's something that you've been experiencing. It's like, okay.
Do you get a thing sometimes you're like, oh, I'm going to text my dad, or I got to call him, and you think about it, and then you're like,
well, here's the thing. I had it's kind of a tragic experience because he had a car accident, I guess 18 years ago now, that he had a severe brain trauma.
oh.
So he was in a coma for a few months after that. He eventually woke up. He shouldn't have made it, but he survived. And he kind of lived 17 years, in his home watching TV, and that was it. Because he didn't have the ability to work anymore. He lost his memory. He could walk and talk some, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So it was like, he always had to ask me, wait, didn't you play football? Even though he was at every football game. He'd forget my name sometimes, and just kind of have to like remind him every time you saw him, telling him the same story, where he'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that's right. He just didn't have the spirit that he once had. And so it was kind of a 17 years of a loss. He was physically here, but emotionally not here. And then when he passed, it was almost like I finally could grieve for the first time, because I wasn't able to really grieve him not being around, but physically being here, because I didn't have those conversations with him. So that was challenging. I almost have more peace now that he has passed, but I still look back at my 21-year-old self in sadness for him that he didn't get to have really the father was there for him.
And how much did that motivate you, that he was in this kind of half-life in a way?
When it happened, I had just gotten through an injury playing college football. The night he got in the accident, the next day I had a football game, and we didn't know if he was alive or dead. And so my siblings were like, I was like, what do we do? He was in New Zealand. I was in Ohio. He was on vacation. And I was like, do I play? Do I not play? Like, what would he want me to do? I don't know. I ended up playing. On the second to last play of the game, I broke 3 ribs, actually, in that game. And I thought, okay, my season's over. I don't know if my dad's alive still or if he's dead. What do I do now? When he came back, I got very clear that life is finite. Like, it could happen in a moment like this. Like, I got injured. My career could be over in a moment. He got injured. His life could be over in a moment. So I made a decision that day that I'm always going to go after my dreams, no matter what. And I'm going to do the best to have joy in my life and fun in my life and play. So I went after everything. And even though I was afraid, I didn't let the fear hold me back, because I was like, my dad was larger than life. And if this could happen to him in a moment, then if my life is over tomorrow, at least I want to enjoy this day in this moment. And so it gave me a lot of permission to go after what I wanted. Now, for a couple of years after football was done, I was living on my sister's couch for a year and a half, and I had no way to make money. I was struggling in 2008. I was broke. Hadn't graduated college yet.
You should have called me, man. I
Right?
was on The Office.
There
then.
we go. I wish I'd have known you then.
Yeah.
And I remember, here's the thing about, I guess, losing my father early on. There was no one to rely on. There was like, I had to step up into becoming somewhat of a man for myself at that point, in terms of like, okay, I've got to learn how to make money. I've got to learn how to do my taxes. I've got to learn how to do these things. I can't just ask my dad for money as a 22-year-old anymore. And so in a way, it gave me courage and permission to kind of do the thing that I'm doing now. I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing if he didn't get in that accident then. I don't think I would have had the courage. And so in some ways, I think it was meant to happen.
Wow.
And before he left, the day before he left, I was sitting with him, and there was something off about him. It was really weird. I'd never seen this. And it was almost like he knew this was going to happen.
Wow.
And he told me before he left, I'm going to go on a spiritual journey. And it was kind of weird, because I was like, okay. Yeah, have fun, Dad. Like, you're going to New Zealand. You've wanted to do this for a while. He's like, yeah, but I'm going to take my books. I'm going to practice. I'm going to go deeper into my books on a spiritual journey. Bible and the science and health, which was what I was practicing, Christian Science at the time. I was like, I hope you have a great time. And so when I got the call that he got in his accident, I was like, yeah, I think he predicted this. And we all needed to go on this kind of spiritual journey in this material world when this happened. But it's been interesting since his passing, because it feels weird not being able to know that my father is here. And it sounds like you had a pretty good relationship with your father, right? For many years.
Yeah, we did.
At least you were in conversation. And so
yeah.
when you have that, and then there's a loss, or it's not there anymore.
Yeah.
How have you been able to spiritually and emotionally cope with that loss physically?
You know, it really has to do with grief and the grieving process, which is not something we talk a lot about in Western culture. But I had to learn how to grieve. So, you know, this good year and a half after he died, I would just sometimes burst into tears. I'll never forget, my assistant just came by my office once, and I just had seen some picture of him or something like that, and I was just sobbing. And my assistant walked in, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to?" Oh, and I'm like, "It's okay. I'm just crying because my dad died." And he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll come back." I'm like, "It's all right." I'm like, "Oh."
Wow.
But you grieve so that you can go through, you know. And if you don't grieve and you don't learn how to grieve, you get stuck. And that's a good life lesson. Put that in your next book and smoke it.
Exactly.
But I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Like, we have to, in fact, I've been playing a lot of tennis, and I'm on this like USTA tennis team, and we compete and stuff like that. And I'm not very good, but I'm getting better. But I remember taking lessons with this tennis teacher named Zach Kleiman, and he's here in LA, and we actually interview him in the Geography of Bliss show, because we do an episode in LA. And he said, like, every mistake you make, like, you know, you've got a clear ball and boom, you hit it in the net or something like that. Like, grieve it. Like, grieve
the loss.
Grieve the loss.
The miss.
Grieve the miss.
Really?
Oh. And he's like, feel it. and then you're through it, and then you're on. And then you're like, okay, what can I improve next time? And then you're on to the next thing. But if you skip the grief, you can get stuck. You can get blocked in a kind of like a muscular self-will. But there's something about like, oh, I got it. Okay, what did I do? Oh, I took my eye off the ball, or oh, I didn't go low to high, or I got ahead of myself. Just keep breathing. Okay, I got this one. And then you're back and you're ready to go. But his philosophy is
That's interesting.
To grieve the mistakes.
Think of all the amazing things in life that are expressions of just you. For instance, the song you stream over and over again while you're in your 13th hour of gaming at 4 a.m. in the morning with all the lights off, trying not to wake up your roommates. Or the recommendations that you share with your friends on the top 6 comedy podcasts that are the best to listen to on your way to the gym and back. Or even your new haircut, which may or may not be an epic bowl cut from the 90s and hopefully is. Everything that makes you, you, makes all the difference. State Farm believes insurance should work the same way. Your plan, your coverage, they need to be personalized to you. And the ability to choose the plan you want by picking the options that fit you, like building your home and auto policies, is exactly what the State Farm Personal Price Plan is all about. Getting the coverage you want at an affordable price just for you. So, are you ready to make things personal? Call or go to statefarm.com today to create your State Farm Personal Price Plan. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer, availability, and eligibility may vary. Do you think you understood how to grieve when you were kind of rising into fame with The Office and kind of those years with those seasons? Did you understand grief?
I didn't understand that. And
how did you process frustration, pain, anger?
Not very well. Yeah, I didn't process it very well. I had a lot of addiction issues in my 20s and went through a drug and alcohol phase, porn phase, kind of anything that could kind of help me cope and help kind of medicate discomfort and pain I used for a long period of time until I really have been, in active like therapy and recovery and all that nonsense for a good while now. And, it's so interesting because when you choose to be an actor, you're signing up for disappointment. So if you're an accountant, not much disappointment. Every life comes with disappointments, but you're going to have your, 27 clients or your 12 clients or whatever, and you can have a successful business for 50 years and just be a good accountant, and you won't. But actor, you're constantly putting yourself out there like, hey, I'm auditioning for this.
Pick me, choose me.
Pick me. Here's the script. Or, hey, can we get this? And then you do get to make, a movie or something like that, and then it gets canceled or it bombs, and I've been involved in plenty of those. So it's been an interesting learning dance, and it's took me until, I don't know, my mid-late 40s to kind of learn how to live with kind of constant disappointment and frustration. And so this lesson comes back, which is grieve the disappointment, feel disappointed, feel frustrated, be and then move on. How do we fix it? But you have to go through that feeling before you move on, I believe.
What is it? What was it like not being famous and then being famous? And were you happier before or happier after?
That's so interesting. It's for someone who has had, addiction issues and alcohol issues and then kind of a messed up family situation and essentially spending most of my adult life feeling unlovable. And then you get on a TV show and then the weirdest thing happens, Lewis. All of a sudden, I'll never forget it, like getting famous from The Office, like people coming up and going, I love you.
You're like,
so like they're touching you and they're grabbing, like,
hugging
I
you.
love you.
It's like photos of you.
Oh, I love you. My daughter loves you. My son loves you. We love, there's all this, but it's not really love. They really love getting entertained by the character that I play, which is one small cog in this big machine called The Office. So that is a mind trip. I would say if you are unhappy and you are wired for unhappiness and you are making life choices that kind of keep you in an unhappy mode, ungrateful mode, uncontent mode, a discontent mode, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, you're going to be unhappy and discontent and imbalanced.
Even if you're famous and have money and people want opportunities with you and you have more followers and all that stuff.
We think that that's going to solve our problems. And guess what? That kind of contentment, that kind of like that solidity of well-being, it can't be fixed from anything outside of yourself. So I was discontent and unhappy and a scrappy, unemployed, broke actor,
Yeah.
and trying to make my next rent. In fact, I would say about, 9 months before I got cast on The Office, like we were so broke that I had to pay rent by putting it on my credit card.
Mm-hmm.
And
what was this, 2005, 6?
yeah, four. That was like late 2003, early 2004. So if you're discontent, you'll be happy no matter what the circumstances. So then I become famous, and then I have all this money, and have movie opportunities and lots of doors opening for me all of a sudden for the first time in my life. Heads of movie studios are like, we want to really meet with Rainn Wilson. We love his stuff, and maybe there's a movie he can do. So those doors started open. But if you're in chronic discontent and feeling like I don't have enough, I am not enough, and I don't have enough, it doesn't matter what comes at you. You can all of a sudden say, someone can come up and say, by the way, you're the king of Scotland. We just found the paperwork. Here's the king. Here's your own kingdom. And here's $1 billion. Good luck. Like, you would find a way to be unhappy.
Right.
So
were you more happier before when you were paying rent on a credit card, or happier after?
I was equally unhappy.
Wow.
I was equally unhappy. So I tell you, it was nice to pay off my student loans, and it was nice to have a little money. And I'm not going to lie, that's an important part of the deal, is to, when you don't have to worry about when and how you're going to pay bills. And I know you've been there. That's a big,
it's nice.
That is a big deal. Some happiness experts are kind of like, oh, none of that matters. Like, no, it matters.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I would say if you looked at me, 2001, 2003, I was pretty unhappy and dissatisfied. And then I got The Office, and there was a big rush. But if you cut into me in 2006, 7, 8, right in there, 9, those were some pretty unhappy years at the same time. Yeah.
Wow. So on a scale, let's call it the self-love inner peace scale.
Yeah.
1 to 10, 1 being miserable and 0 happiness, and 10 being total peace inside and self-love. Where were you before and after?
I would say I was at a 3, and then maybe to a 4 or 5.
Wow.
Once I was well known, and then it's been a long struggle, and now I'm doing much better.
Yeah. Where would you say you are now?
I would say it's a daily struggle, and I have to do daily work, but I'm really at an 8.
That's great.
Maybe a 9. Yeah.
When do you feel the most loved and the most enough?
I think in my contemplation practice, my mindfulness practice, my meditation practice, I view meditation as something like when your computer is acting all funky and you have to reboot it, and like the apps aren't working right and the pages and then you reboot it and go, and then all of a sudden like it's moving smoothly again. Like, my meditation practice allows me that. I also combine that with a prayer practice. I do believe in God. I believe that there is an incredible divine force out there for us to tap into. And that is the source of love itself. I would equate God much more to just the force of love, which is synonymous with the force of gravity, than any kind of like guy or dude or deity or some old man with a beard or someone, like a Marvel superhero shooting their, like, I'm going to give Lewis this thing, and I'm going to give him this parking spot. I'm going to give her cancer. And so when I'm able to kind of tap into that force of love, when I'm able to, Annie Lamott, was a great thinker and writer, humorist. She wrote a book called Help, Thanks, Wow. And those are the 3 prayers: help, thanks, and wow. I think it's so brilliant. I love that book so much. So simple, but when you're connecting with that great spirit, like help, like, hey, I could really use help with this. I'm struggling with this. Perfectly okay. And thank you for what I have. Thank you for the gratitude. And then just wow, like the miracle of being alive, the miracle of everything.
Wow. What do you wish people knew about money, fame, and success, and also how to create and feel enough and happy with all 3 of those as well?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, I would write my own best-selling book, Lewis.
Do you feel like so that's a constant journey for you to figure out how to manage those things and also find that peace and happiness and self-acceptance for yourself? And also, I'm curious, do you feel like there are anyone in Hollywood or any celebrities with, fame and money and success who have mastered this? And also finding like true deep sense of, I am enough. I don't need to compare myself to others and one up everyone else in Hollywood or in the success world. I have enough. I am enough. I'm becoming more, but I don't need it to feel more enough.
Yeah. Some of the most unhappy people I've met have been multimillionaires in Hollywood. And on both sides of the cameras, like directors, writers, actors, big stars, agents. A friend of mine told me, like, if you're ever in an airport and you're just looking for the gate of people flying to LA and you didn't look up on the board, just look for the gate with the most beautiful people who also look the most miserable.
There you go.
It's kind of true.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about, to unpack around that. I mean, gosh, I think that, number one, it's really important for people to understand that there is a lot of struggle going on, and people might really present well on social media and on talk shows and in their books and whatnot, but people are struggling. And, I'm not saying I'm a big star, but like big stars that I know that are, very successful, they really have struggles. They've struggled in interpersonal relationships and in doubt and self-esteem. And I feel like the road to self-love is just a road through struggles. This brings me to this Buddhist idea, and I talk a lot about this in Soul Boom. I reference Buddhism a lot because I've learned so much from studying it. But the Buddha has, as you know, the Four Noble Truths, which are kind of the foundation of Buddhist thought and the elimination of suffering. So one of the key, not the only thing the Buddha came for, but the Buddha came to help relieve suffering. So life is suffering. That's the number one truth. Life is suffering. It's interesting because in Sanskrit, the word is actually dukkha. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but dukkha means dissatisfaction. It means struggle, conflict, overwhelm, light pain. It's just the pain of being alive. So I would interpret it as saying, like, life is about the pain of being alive. And when you know that, I find that very helpful to me. When I come back to that, I'm like, I'm struggling. I'm disappointed here. I wish this outcome had been different. Oh, I didn't get that job. God. And then, but when I can come back to like, oh, but that's what life's all about. So what do I do now? Like, oh, am I clutching? Am I grasping? Am I wanting to control outcomes? And am I wanting people to like me? Am I wanting all this stuff outside of me? And I'm desperately grasping at all that stuff? Oh, that's the source of my suffering. Because when you're in that kind of Zen mode, you can be like, oh, life is suffering. And guess what? All these things didn't happen. And I get to feel disappointment. It's like a breath. It's like in the tennis game. It's like, disappointment breath. And then a new breath.
Yeah.
And
next
then,
play.
And then the next, exactly. And then you're on to the next play, but you don't carry that disappointment with you. But you don't stuff it down somewhere and stick it in a closet.
You do not acknowledge it. You acknowledge it and then you move on.
Exactly.
You refocus your attention.
You breathe it, you experience it, and then you move on and you heal in the doing.
What do you think if you could have told yourself 3 things about what you're about to go through, with The Office and all the things that came with it, all the amazing things and maybe the more amplified, challenging things that you face as well. What do you wish you could have told yourself the day before, getting that role, or the day before the first, time on set, to be able to manage it all and love yourself deeper? Or did you just need more time to kind of...
So I'm gonna get a little mystical. Okay, this might be a little mystical for your audience.
I'm in.
Okay, so I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. So the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith is a man named Abdul Baha, and his name means servant of glory. Anyways, Abdul Baha about 100 years ago came to the United States, and a reporter wanted to interview this famous prophet and was like, "Hey, do Baha'is believe in Satan?" And Abdul Baha said, "Yes, we do. Satan is the insistent self." And I just love that. So as opposed to like a red guy with a pitchfork who's
underneath the ground,
under the ground, like whispering in your ears and causing you temptation, and he's like the forces of darkness, he's got his demon army or whatever. Like, it's in here. It's in here. The insistent self. What does that mean? Well, it's the ego, So, and that goes back again to Buddhist thought. It goes back to the most ancient spiritual writings in the world, the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Vedantic practice and Tibetan Buddhism, where your struggle is the ego, right? And in Islam, jihad, the greater jihad is the struggle within yourself. The lesser jihad is like, if there's enemies that are attacking you, you fight those enemies. But the jihad that everyone is fighting is that struggle within ourselves against our own ego. So this idea of struggling against, because the ego, what does the ego get? And again, ego's tough because we want a healthy self-esteem. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that part of yourself that is like envious and competitive to a fault and wants to put it's a narcissistic part of yourself, wants to put yourself above someone else. It compares yourself to others, that wants to like obtain and get and try and satisfy itself like a dragon with its hoard. And so I would have maybe shown myself some writings about the struggle with the ego if I'm cutting back to 2005, 2006 and those years. I had a lot of ego struggles, and even though I had done a lot of thinking and meditating and reading about spiritual practices and mindfulness and whatnot, I was not able to put that in play. So it just became life after The Office became, like a pachinko machine. The little ball goes, like that. Like my life and my ego became like a pachinko machine, where it's like this success and here's a bunch of money and you get this movie. Oh, the movie bombed, but you get a different one, and this and they want to do, and you won this award, and you lost the Emmy to Jeremy Piven, and this is it. So it's like tick. So it's all of the stuff outside of yourself, but where's that garden that we can nurture and grow within ourselves? Because that garden you can take with you anywhere.
Yeah. When did you feel like you actually got into that space of practicing it? How many years did it take for you to finally be like, okay, this pinball machine is going everywhere, ups and downs, and success and ego and fame and losses. When did you start to say, this is all happening outside of me?
Yeah.
But let me start to nurture and tend to this garden inside of me for more peace and inner prosperity, not outer prosperity.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I know I don't look it. I'm 57 years old.
Great, man.
48, 49 is when that started.
So
when I was really able to put into practice some of the spiritual guidance that I had been studying, some of the therapeutic and positive psychology studies that I'd been studying. And for those, and I want to say for those watching at home that might have a problem with spirituality or God or religion, and first of all, spirituality and religion are totally separate things. Not totally separate, but they are separate things. Then that's fine. Put that aside, and there's a wonderful reservoir of information that you have drawn on all 1,400 of your episodes from the positive psychology movement. And so positive psychology always arrives at the same data points that ancient wisdom from faith traditions arrives at. Goes through a different way, but one, you can learn a great deal from following what, great teachers, like, Jonathan Haidt has the happiness hypothesis, and so many great books on happiness and podcasts on happiness and well-being, and Arthur Brooks and David Brooks and all the Brooks. It's the same wisdom. It's just kind of packaged a little differently.
Sure. Wow. So about 8-9 years ago is when you kind of started to tend to your inner garden.
Isn't that pathetic?
It's not pathetic.
I should have had it at 33.
Okay, Jesus. Yeah. I think, I wish I could have learned these things a lot sooner as well, but it wasn't really until 2 years ago when I felt a sense of peace in my heart that I never felt.
Wow.
And when I hit 38, I just turned 40.
What happened there?
I only felt peace when I was single. But when I was in relationships, I felt trapped, and I felt a sense of not enoughness and never going to be able to live up to someone's standards and people pleasing and all these things that you mentioned as well, similar things. And I never...
Sounds like a little codependence going on there too.
Yeah, and it was I was afraid because my parents were trapped. And so I grew up watching a model of them not really accepting or loving one another. And I didn't know which night, if it was going to be like peaceful or chaotic. Every night you just didn't know how they were going to be screaming or reacting or cold shoulders. So I just didn't have a healthy model. And I don't blame them. It all developed me in a certain way to be a curious learner of this and try to support others going through the same challenge. It's one of the reasons why I left home at 13, because I was like, get me out of here. It was just very up and down, chaotic at home. My brother was also in prison for 4.5 years when I was 8 till I was 12. So it was just like a lot of sadness, grief, loss, pain within the family dynamic. And I know lots of families go through their own unique family dynamic of dysfunction. So this was just my own perspective. And I just went after a feeling as opposed to being the feeling. I went after wanting something and desiring people and then needing to make sure that it worked out and going all in on it, even when I had to change who I was to try to make them, quote unquote, happy. The partners I chose were never happy with me. They didn't accept me for who I was. And I don't blame them. I chose them for a reason. I needed to learn the lessons. And it wasn't until I became fully peaceful and happy and on a healing journey of who I was and everything about my past, really grieving all the different parts of me. That's when I felt peace. So going back to the first thing you talked about, which was grieving. I did about, 9 months of inner child healing and therapy. And,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I want to please
go ahead.
Pick it up from there. But I just want to say, I think this is super important that you can share with your audience your struggle and to say, here I am not really kind of figuring out how to be at peace in a relationship until my late 30s. I don't have it all figured out. I struggle. I think that's so great that you're willing to share that.
I share it on here all the time about all my struggles. I kind of am like the guinea pig of breakdowns. I'm like, here's how I'm suffering and struggling and what I'm, working out with my health, relationships, money, spirituality.
So you talk about the inner child work. Did you do some therapeutic?
For 9 months. I was like, I had a screensaver on my phone of my 5-year-old self. Not from a narcissistic point of view of like, oh, look at me as a kid, but more of like, oh, look how sad I was. And look how much I was suffering and unsure of myself I was, and always asking, why am I even here? What's the point of this? And just getting into trouble a lot. And so having compassion for my 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old self and putting myself in the mystical situations spiritually where I'm there having a conversation and comforting my 5-year-old self as a 38-year-old adult with the wisdom and experience that I have now.
Yeah.
Those experiences reunited me with a broken memory, a memory of mine that was broken, bruised, and hurt psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And this allowed me to create harmony and congruency with the parts of myself that I was most ashamed of. This was also the time when I was sexually abused by a man that I didn't know, 5 years old. my second memory is of being sexually abused in a bathroom by a man that I didn't know. And I never grieved that. Like you said, going back to grieving, I never even acknowledged it for 25 years. It wasn't until 10 years ago when I started to open up and talk about that and process it with support. That released a pressure valve within me that had been building up for 25 years, which drove me to excel in athletics, in business, and getting results. I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. No one's going to hurt me ever again. But by not acknowledging or grieving the pain and the sadness of the 5-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 13-year-old, the 27-year-old, and all these different breakdowns I had, and always going to the next point without grieving the loss, it caused many breakdowns in my life, physically, relationally, financially. When on the outside things looked good, but on the inside it was a 1, 2, or 3.
Wow. That's powerful.
And so 10 years ago, right when I started this show, was a part of that journey of healing and finding people that could share their stories so I could try to learn from them and apply some of these lessons. But 2 years ago specifically is when I went even deeper, because I was really struggling in a previous relationship. And so I did about 6 months of intensive weekly therapy of healing the inner child within myself.
That's great.
And then doing it from the different parts of my childhood from 12 to 18 and 27, and kind of marrying all those memories, creating new meaning from them into where I'm at now. That's what allowed me. There was a moment after about, 6 or 7 months of this therapy practice I was doing.
What was it called?
It's just working with a coach.
Okay.
Yeah, therapist, yeah. But it was just very intense. I was doing like 7-8 hour sessions, on Saturdays. I was just like, I need to figure this out. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm sick of pain. I'm sick of the suffering. Tell me what to practice, try, do, whatever you want to do, I'll do it.
Okay, let me
You know
tell
what I'm saying?
you. Yeah. Can I tell you a story
Give it to me.
along those same lines? People are watching are probably like,
When did Lewis turn into Oprah?
So when I was struggling a lot, this was a while back, I went to this therapy retreat center called PCS in Scottsdale. And I did a couple different weeks there and different kinds of sessions and different kinds of work. One of the things they have you do there, not for everyone, but they do inner child work. It's therapy 12 hours a day. You stay off site, but you're in, and it's very intense.
Wow.
They have you on the first day, go to the mall to the Build-A-Bear workshop. And you build your inner child.
Shut up.
So I went and I built my inner child
That's amazing.
as a bear.
I love this.
And you name it.
That's beautiful.
And you have conversations and you carry it with you the entire week.
That is a beautiful exercise.
The entire week. So it's like kind of embarrassing, because I was like walking around.
Yeah, I
with
know.
this.
Here's the thing. A lot of people that are watching or listening, they've heard me talk about this stuff for a while. But I'm always trying to be a Trojan horse. You look at me, I'm this big, jock-looking guy, 6'4", former athlete, all these different things. And I try to draw...
Doofus looking, look
Exactly.
like an IQ of 13, like
It's true, though.
farmhand kind of.
My IQ was pretty low. My EQ is high, but IQ is very low.
I'm kidding.
But the goal has always been to draw people in that want success, that want greatness, that want, money, all these different things, and talk about these things, but also talk about the healing modalities that allow you to feel peaceful and enough when you have the championship, when you have the money, when you have the role at the office. Because, I was great at sports and accomplished a lot, but I'd never felt I loved myself or that I was lovable, kind of like what you talked about.
Mm.
Then I transitioned into making money and building a business, and I built a multi-million-dollar company and all these different things, but I still didn't feel lovable.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, how do I get to this place where I can actually accept and love me? And so this process, which sounds similar, but I love the idea of having a physical representation of your inner child. That is a beautiful experience. And I'm assuming you had conversations and did exercises and did some weird things that
Yep.
if people were watching, to be like, okay,
And if
you're crazy, man.
And if someone was doing it and
In public.
left their inner child
Oh my
on the
gosh.
couch, or even went to go get a cup of coffee and left it, the therapist would be like, "What the are you doing? You're gonna leave your child there?" And it was this training of wow, I in heart, and when I was a child, I was so vulnerable, and I suffered so much trauma and pain, but guess what? I get to re-parent myself.
Man, this is beautiful.
I get to hold my own hand.
Oh my God.
And I get to see baby Rainn, baby Lewis, and give him the love that he didn't get when his mom took off when he's a year and a half old, and my dysfunctional dad was stuck with this big weird looking toddler, and I get to be part of that process, and it was really powerful.
This
We did
is
a
beautiful.
lot of really intense stuff.
Here's the thing. When I was 21, if I would have watched this conversation or heard this, I'd have been like, what a bunch of, what a bunch of wusses.
Suck
what a bunch
it up.
Don't be such a baby, right?
Yeah.
I said like, whatever, because I was just in more of an ego mindset. And I'd have been like, just tell me how to make money. Just tell me to be happy. Just tell me to I want to be successful.
Yeah.
Just teach me that. Like, touch me those, what are those steps? What are those skills? And I hope people watching or listening, specifically men, if you're watching or listening, that you can just listen and hear this perspective. You don't have to listen to me, listen to you and hear this perspective of, I truly believe that the highest form of currency right now is peace. Because you said you can have lots of money and still be miserable and unhappy. The highest form of currency, I think, is peace. Peace with your relationships, peace with your career choices or the business you have, peace with your health, and peace with yourself. And when we don't have that, it just becomes harder. And so for me, it's figuring out how to stay in congruency and alignment with self and be in a peaceful state. It doesn't mean we're not going to experience stress and challenge and overwhelm and let down and all these things, but doing the best to stay in peace will allow us to feel better, make the people around us feel better, and make better decisions in our lives. So I hope people are listening. I hope the women listening share this with their male friends. And know it from two different individuals of different backgrounds. You as the career and, and acting and all these different things that you've done in media, me from sports and business, that it matters to make money, but if you're miserable and you're hurting yourself in that process, then it's just amplifying the pain that you already have. And so this is the work, in my opinion.
Amen.
You don't have to go to Build-A-Bear and make an inner child, physical representation and hold the bear around all day. But I feel like do something that works for you.
Yeah.
Do something that works for you. And for me, doing intensive therapy weekly for months supported me. For you, this 2-week experience worked for you. And it's an ongoing journey of healing from my experience. It doesn't just happen overnight and you're healed. For me, it's an ongoing practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's beautifully said, really, and so important. And I love that currency of peace. Like, if you can gain peace in your inner garden, I like to use that metaphor, and well-being, and feel like I am enough. I've shared this before. Our mutual friend Justin Baldoni, I talked to him about this. That when I was first starting the therapy process, my therapist was having me say daily affirmations. They gave me a list. Here's a list of them, and it's just like, oh, give me a break.
Like, what were the few things you
remember? Like, I'm a good father. I'm worthy of love. The first one on the list is I am enough.
Wow.
And I picked it up and I was like, I am enough. Nope, not doing that. It was so hard for me to look at or think about saying that. And he was like, well, that's the one that you have to say. So I had to hang it on the mirror. Every morning I had to get up and brush my teeth and look in the mirror and go, I am enough. And it's, do you remember Stuart Smalley, that Saturday Night Live character? It's like, I'm good enough. Gosh darn it. And I forget Al Franken played this character, Stuart Smalley. Insert clip. But it's corny, it's schmaltzy, but it really helped me. But it also helped me to see, like, wow, I really don't believe that I am enough.
That's the interesting thing. How do you, because I think when we say a false affirmation that we haven't actually believed yet, sometimes it's like, okay, well, we're lying to ourselves when you don't believe it, and yet you're looking at it and you're saying it over and over again. So I love that practice, but it's like we have our emotional state has to catch up to it and actually learn how to process, grieve, heal, and actually believe it. So how did you build yourself in overcoming the insecurities or the self-doubt in order to actually believe that you were enough, not just say the affirmation every day?
Well, that's a really good point. And I hadn't thought about that, but I agree with you. I think it can be dangerous to kind of say a bunch of affirmations that you don't really believe, like you're going to manifest them, but you don't have
believe it.
That organic, authentic kind of kernel of belief inside your gut. But I think that what it did for me is it's kind of like in the show Kung Fu, which I reference in the book Soul Boom. It's one of my favorite television shows of all time. He's like, when you can snatch the pebble from my hand, then you will be ready to go. And that's a runner through the show. And finally, Kwai Chang Caine is able to snatch the pebble from the hand, and he leaves the Shaolin monastery and goes to the Old West and fights a bunch of racist cowboys. Anyways, another topic. But it's like, when you can snatch the pebble from my hand of really believing I am enough, then you're ready. Then you're really ready. So for me, I would say it and I was not getting the pebble. I recognized, oh, I don't believe that I'm enough. I really don't. And I've got work to do. So it was helpful for me to kind of go like, oh my God. I mean, it was a good, 10 years of me saying I am enough when I didn't believe it, until it started through the work that I was doing to kind of believe it. In the last 8, 9, 10 years, I really have come to believe that I am enough.
Well, I mean, there's some beauty in this for people watching and listening, that I think there's a lot of people that don't believe they're enough, which for me, my mission is to give people the tools, the inspiration, the expertise, the knowledge, the science, the research from others on how they can start to believe in themselves more. I believe self-doubt is the killer of dreams. I think it holds us back from going after what we want. When we doubt ourselves, we lack the courage, or even worse, when we accomplish the thing and we don't feel enough, it's like, what will make me feel enough? I was accomplishing in sports, you were accomplishing in acting, and you still weren't feeling enough with the height of your career with that show, right? It was like, okay, why do I still not feel enough? And I believe when we can overcome that insecurity and doubt, that's when we can start to really step into a beautiful way of being. And it's been a process and a journey for me. I'm curious, what do you think it was that allowed you to start to believe that you were enough after all those years of kind of saying it and practicing it and the modalities and the training? Was there one thing that where you're like, okay, now I'm starting to feel it? What was that letting go or skill that you learned that supported it?
That's a great question. And I wish I had kind of some nugget, but it just was a shift, it was a lot of work. It was it's like you put in the work. You can, use athletics as a metaphor, you
practice daily.
You practice and you work at it and you fail and you struggle and there's ups and downs. And, it was finding a really good therapist and doing some retreats and doing some reading and working with my wife a lot. I learned a ton from my wife. She's much better at this stuff than I am. And it wasn't kind of like an aha thing,
over time.
When I look back on it now, oh yeah, I'm so much more at peace now than I was, and I have been for many years. But when I look back at those years,
well, some people might say, Rainn, well, I mean, okay, now you can have more peace because you make all this money and you have this success and you've had your career come true. But I'm a struggling actor here in LA, and I'm barely scraping by, and I get rejected constantly. So do I have to wait that long until I can feel enough?
Yes. No.
Wait.
No, anyone can do the work. I think that there's a lot to say on that.
And also, sorry to cut you out there, do you think you would have been able to accomplish what you accomplished by feeling you were enough before?
So that is an interesting conversation, because for both of us, we felt like we weren't enough. We worked our tails off to kind of prove to the world that we're enough. And we scraped our way up and built careers, right? Me, this weird looking actor guy, and If I had felt blissed out, peaceful, and just content with who I was at 24, would I have striven the way I did? Would I have struggled and clawed my way from, unemployed actor in New York City to, Emmy-nominated, television show and lots of money? Like, would I have, sometimes, and you see that with so many people that are really driven, there's something kind of broken inside them that goads them on. So I don't, but I do think that, so I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know what the answer
Interesting
is.
to reflect on, though.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation to have.
You mentioned your wife. How long have you been married?
Oh, man.
Might get you in trouble here. Yeah.
28 years, 27 years. Yeah.
What is the thing you love the most about your wife?
I love so much about my wife. I can't even begin to describe that. She has the most beautiful heart and the most beautiful sense of wonder of anyone that I've ever known. Like, it can be a poem she's reading. It can be a flower that she sees. It can be, we have all these weird pets, something with one of our animals, the way she loves animals. Like, there's this, and to watch her kind of like interact with something, and it could be a video on Instagram of like an otter building a castle in the kitchen or something, and but her that heart-centered delight and wonder that she has is really it's really special, and I get to witness that on multiple times a day, and this goes to, and I'm sure you've talked a lot about it on your show. I haven't listened to all 14 of them.
That's all I guess.
And it goes to gratitude, which is one of the most powerful forces in the universe. And I'm on a gratitude text chain. So every morning I get up, my group of guys.
Really?
And 5 things we're grateful for. Wake up, 5 things we're grateful for. So it shifts that mindset from that Buddhist idea of dukkha, of dissatisfaction, to what we're grateful for. So I get to say that I am grateful for my wife, and I get to feel that gratitude every day. Now, could I look at all the things that she doesn't do well and that bug me and that annoy me and that we've had a history with? Yeah, of course I could, and we all struggle with that in relationships. But, to lead with gratitude, doors open.
What advice would you give to people in relation? Because you've been with her for a while before you were successful, right? What advice would you give to people in relationships?
By the way, she liked being with me back when I was broke a lot better than when I was successful in the office, because I went through a couple of years where I was just kind of a raging.
Sure. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to couples where, maybe one or both of them are starting to like get some notoriety or, followers or success, or their business or career is taking off, and they're getting a little ego, and they're, having some attention from the outside world? What would you share your wisdom on how to set your relationship up for more harmony?
And this is where I think spirituality comes into play, because if we are spiritual beings having a human experience, then we are there in a coupleship to support each other's spiritual journey.
Yes.
So I get to, achieve kind of fame and success from the office, and she gets to support me on my spiritual journey of going through that, the good and the bad.
Interesting.
Right. And then, she gets, she's an author. She publishes a book. She writes something new. She struggles. I support her on her journey, on her successes, on her highs and lows. So marriage all too often, I think, can feel kind of circumstantial, and it needs to feel, and I think there's a reason why the faith traditions, when you get married in front of God and like till death do us part, but like the idea that your souls are wedded, and beyond this world, like into eternal worlds, there's a companionship there. So it's that spiritual support and that we're each going to have times when we need more support and we're able to give more. And there's a dance, there's a yin and yang kind of back and forth.
That's beautiful. I don't know why I'm curious about this, but who is the person or persons that you respect the most in this business? The business of Hollywood, the business, show business, which is kind of like a circus, I feel like. Are there a couple people, you don't have to throw anyone under the bus who, you don't think is doing well or whatever, but is there a couple people that, whether it's from the office or since after them, that you really respect, you think they're living life in a great way, as well as having a great career, they've got solid relationships, you feel like they have a strong foundation emotionally? Are there a couple people you really respect? Or,
it's, as you were asking that question, I was like, oh, Steve Carell. And then I was like, well, really, no, it's more Jenna. And then I was like, well, Angela. And I was like, well, John Krasinski does pretty good. And I was like, BJ does. And so I really have to say, shout out to my office cast members, like that entire cast, I really admire and respect how they live their lives in Hollywood and the choices that they make. Steve puts family first, and he's a very kind of shy and reserved guy, and really cherishes his privacy, but works hard on his marriage and the life of his family. Jenna and Angela are the same way, but I really admire the way Jenna and Angela just give joy to people. They love to just spread joy and positivity in their work. And John, who's really taken off as a director and an actor and all kinds of things, like, again, his family first, absolutely, his wife and daughters, and the way that he kind of keeps his ego in check and is able to really focus on doing some really great and lasting work. And I admire the whole office cast. I know I'm not trying to cop out, but they all have things that I admire and that I've learned from.
That's cool. I think when we met, I think it was 6 years ago, actually, is what they were saying. But I think when you walked in the studio, my other studio, one of the first things you said is, "You look like John Krasinski." I think you said that 6 years ago. So, you still pretty close with a lot of that group? Is that a family that's still close? Like everyone's kind of like still in contact?
Yeah, we text all the time. We have text chains and
that's nice.
Talk
supporting
with
each other,
and
celebrating each other's wins. That's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's great. Because I'm assuming you could be on a show or on a movie set for a few months and act like you're really bonding, but then everyone goes off to their next project or thing, and then you kind of lose touch, right?
Yep.
But you guys have stayed together.
We have.
That's amazing.
We have. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this book, Soul Boom: Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution, because I feel like there's a lot of sadness and suffering, like we've talked about, in the world. And anytime someone wants to open up about spirituality, which I think is really about having a deeper relationship with self-acceptance, self-love, with yourself and with the universe, I think it's exciting. So I'm so glad that you're talking about this and that this book is out. I'm curious, what is the spiritual lesson? Because you mentioned you were atheist for a while and you've gone through your faith journey. What was the spiritual lesson you learned as a kid that maybe you let go of or forgot or rejected, but have now come back to accept?
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because that's how I start the book, is comparing the spiritual journey to two of my favorite television shows from the 1970s, which I experienced as a kid. And I've done a lot of reflecting back on, which is Kung Fu, like I talked about, which is Kwai Chang Caine going through the rough and tumble West as a Shaolin monk. He's half Chinese, and he experiences a lot of racism and a lot of violence and aggression, and he takes his Eastern wisdom and teaches people's lessons. And he also kicks ass when he needs to. With Kung Fu, there's going to be a couple of fights per episode, which we all waited for with bated breath. And that I compare to like our personal spiritual journey. So you, Lewis, you've talked to 1,400 people, you've gained this wisdom, this insight, but then you go out in the world and you have your girlfriend and your family, and you're navigating the world and trying to use better yourself, you're doing your therapy work, you're trying to make yourself a better person, increase your positive qualities, your divine qualities, your spiritual qualities, some could say, of compassion and kindness and love, right? So that's that path. My other favorite TV show from the 70s was Star Trek. So Star Trek I see as also a spiritual journey, not on an individual level, but on a collective level. Because people forget that in Star Trek, the mythology is there's been a huge World War III. And out of the ashes of that terrible conflagration, humanity has succeeded and thrived and overcome its past divisions. There is, I don't want to get anyone upset, there is a one world government. So a lot of people are like, oh, there's one world government. Like, well, Star Trek, pretty successful, Federation, one world government. I'm all for it. But we've overcome racism, we've overcome sexism. There's no more income inequality, right? Technology has allowed us to have, what do they call it? The little things where you can make a bowl of soup, or the replicator, and you can like get anything out of it. So technology has taken us to a point where then humanity is able to seek out new life and new civilizations and spread technology and peace and connection throughout the universe and be filled with wonder and whatnot. And, I don't think Gene Roddenberry intended the show to be spiritual. I think it was, about technology, the wonders of technology from the 60s and 70s. But really, humanity has matured, right? And even when you get to Star Trek: The Next Generation, there's no conflict anymore. And then Roddenberry insisted when they were doing Star Trek: The Next Generation, like humanity at this point, because that was further than the original series, that they not be in conflict. So you don't see Picard and number one like arguing over, no, we should go over there. No, Picard, you idiot, shouldn't land there. We should, humanity has figured out, has matured beyond even conflict. So I get into a lot of stuff in the book. I get into death, consciousness, the meaning of life. I have a whole chapter on God called The Notorious God. I talk about sacredness, looking for the holy in our lives, religion, the purpose of religion. Is religion good or bad? Why is there religion? But a lot of it towards the tail end of the book is really about this Star Trek journey. Because when a lot of people think about spirituality, they think about cultivating serenity and finding and quelling anxiety and finding beauty and some purpose and some connection. But it's here in the heart, and that's very important. And that's where you got to start, and it's really important. But we also have a spiritual journey collectively on planet Earth to try and make the world a better place. And for example, you think about compassion. That's something we can get better at, is compassion, right? Feeling for other people. Whenever I'm at my worst, I'm not in compassion. I'm like, oh, screw him. Oh, that's bull. What? Can be judgmental and oh, those idiots, why didn't they do that? And they should just do, but when I'm able to increase my compassion, say, we're all in this human struggle together. Oh, those poor people. Imagine just how much an increase of compassion could help us as a species move forward on the planet, to just maximize, we're talking Jesus-like compassion or Buddha-like compassion. It could be a powerful force. In fact, I have a little scenario in there. I was like, what if humanity could invent a compassion machine? So picture an MRI machine or something where you put electrodes on your scalp or whatever it is. I don't know what it looks like. But then you're able to connect with someone on the other side of the world. He's a goat herder in Yemen, or it's someone plowing a field in Pakistan, or whatever it is, someone completely different than you. And in this compassion machine, you're able to see and feel the world through their eyes and through their heart. Imagine if we were actively every day, everyone spent half an hour in a compassion machine, and we had just a much deeper understanding of the difficulties of what it's like to be a goat herder in Yemen or a farmer in Pakistan. And but these are some of like the spiritual tools that lie in the world's faith traditions that can be transformative for us as a species on the planet. So my 5-year-old lesson, these 2 TV shows kind of show us the way forward.
Wow, that's good. That's a good answer. I've got a couple final questions for you, but I want people to get the book, Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. Make sure you guys check it out. Get a couple copies for your friends as well. And you also have a show coming out.
Yeah.
A new show coming out about bliss, essentially.
Yeah.
Can you share more about what this is before I get to the final few questions?
The Geography of Bliss is a show that is coming out May 18th, 2023. I don't know what year you might be listening to this podcast. On the Peacock Network, which also has, conveniently, The Office.
Ah,
And
tag team them.
Yep, exactly.
I love the video you posted on Instagram lately on a plane.
Oh, yeah.
With you, like, I think we were wearing a mask. And
Yeah,
there was
the
a
guy watching the plane,
Office.
yeah.
And you were like on the screen and you're like, this guy has no idea who he's sitting next to. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was fun. But the Geography of Bliss is me traveling around the world to 5 different locations and looking for happiness and trying to learn about happiness from other cultures. And it was, I'll always say, oh, The Office was the best job I ever had. It's like, no. Geography of Bliss is the best job I ever had. Getting paid to travel the world and talk to people about happiness and ride elephants in Thailand and pet lambs in Iceland and take taxi rides through the jungles of Ghana. Like, it was exceptional. And I feel like it's coming together, like you talk so much about vision in your book, and but this vision of this next chapter of my life post-office of being able to talk about some spiritual and psychological topics and talk to people about happiness and make entertainment, make them laugh at the same time. I'm not like trying to be some guru or something like that. But to me, it's incredibly satisfying.
That's interesting. What was the number one key to happiness from all these different individuals you met around the world?
Well, I'm going to read it from this book because it connects.
Perfect.
Do you know about the Grant study out of Harvard University?
75-year study?
Yeah.
Yes.
75-year study, 300 men, Harvard University, searching for what makes a good life. All these data points, thousands of data points over the decades. The final doctor overseeing the study, Dr. George Valent, I think there's a new one now, but he was before, he said his final culmination was, the only thing that really matters in life are your relationships to other people. So wherever I went in the world and I saw people succeeding at well-being, at inspiration and happiness, contentment, they're connected to other people. It's community. It's all about community.
And I think as Gabor Mate talks about, I'm going to paraphrase it, I think it's the relationships with others, but also the relationship to ourselves and making sure we have a good relationship with self. It's hard to have great relationships with others if we don't have a beautiful relationship with self, if we don't have compassion for ourselves or the parts of ourselves that we are most ashamed of or guilty or insecure about. And so I think it's a 2-part thing. It's like having great relationships with others, but also developing the quality relationship with self. And it's for me, it's inspiring to see you continue to develop a beautiful relationship with yourself so that you can be of service more in these other ways that you're doing with this book and the show that you have going on. So I'm excited about that. Here's a question I wanted to ask you about comparison, because you mentioned this earlier in the interview about comparison, and I'm curious, how can someone learn to not compare themselves to others in an industry, whether it's acting or sports or business or podcasting or books, whatever it is? Did you compare yourself a lot when you were kind of becoming famous and rising up in this space? Or were you pretty focused on your own race and you weren't thinking about what everyone else was doing? And if so, how did you overcome that comparison mentality?
So Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy. And if if you are looking for joy, if you're looking for bliss, contentment, and self-acceptance, that's a good place to start. Stop comparing yourself to others, because you just don't know their circumstances. You don't know your circumstances. And there were a lot of people that I was incredibly envious of early on in my career doing theater in New York. Oh, it's something I've struggled with my whole life. I mean, I've really let it go now, but, and they had their moment in, let's say, New York theater in the 90s.
Broadway or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've had my moment. We all have our moments if you have talent, and but it's a really important one of like, I don't know if there's any kind of miracle to it. It's just stop it. Don't do it. Just don't compare yourself.
That's
like it doesn't work. It doesn't help you. Envy is like, that's in every spiritual tradition, right? The envy and the green, what did Shakespeare call envy? The green goblin or something like that, maybe. So yeah, that has been a big struggle for me. It's especially a struggle for actors because you're
going into a role and auditioning, and there's 50 other guys or whatever.
There's
and you're like
20 guys in a room, and one of you gets the part, and like, oh, he did it, and then you go in again, and the same guy gets the thing, and you're like, God, him, and so, Nick Offerman is a great example. Like he and I used to audition for all the same roles, and then I got on The Office. I actually got him, introduced him to the producers of The Office, and they had his picture on the wall, and they thought of him for Parks and Recreation, which was going to be a comedy spinoff. And I'm not saying I got him the role, but I, opened the door. Then he had that thing, and now he's been doing so much great work in television and having a career. There was a time when, because we're similar actors in a lot of ways, we're different in a lot of ways as well. But he's. But I just remember those early years of me and Nick Offerman being in the audition, like, oh, you again, and we never had that with each other, and we're able to really support each other. And then he's written a bunch of books, I've written a bunch of books, and
that's cool.
We support each other there as well. But yeah, it's been a struggle.
I guess if you want to stay miserable, compare yourself to everyone, right? If you want to be miserable, compare yourself to everyone.
It's a great place to start. If you want to start, like you're talking about like School of Greatness, right? Like these action items that you can make your life better. Number one, stop comparing yourself to others.
I love that.
Okay?
Love it. Rainn,
you're just as good a podcast host as Rich Roll, okay?
There you go.
All right?
For me, the thing that I've learned that helped me, because I don't know if I used to compare, but I used to compete.
Okay.
Until 10 years ago. And I'm still like competitive in certain life, but more like towards games. It's not about like, I don't know, my business. It's like, okay, I want to be the best I can be, but I'm not trying to necessarily beat others.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a scarcity business and a scarcity world where I've really shifted into collaboration as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here's someone, me and Rich have been friends for, 11 years. And so we just support each other. How can I help you in succeeding, and you can help me in succeeding?
Yeah.
And let's just collaborate more. And there's abundance. There's room for both.
I love those words, scarcity and abundance, because if you've undergone some kind of child trauma and you feel less than, you feel scarcity and you feel like I'm never going to get what I need, and there's not going to be enough for me, right? It's like someone who grows up in an orphanage. Even when they're an adult and they can have $1 million in the bank, they'll hide cookies under the mattress, afraid that they're going to be hungry, and to just know there is enough for everyone. We can all have some success, and we can kind of live our lives in abundance.
It probably wasn't until 4 years ago where I stopped sleeping on people's couches, like when I would travel. Like I used to like travel and be like, who do I know in this city that I can crash on?
Right.
As opposed to like just paying for the hotel room, because I was like, this is money I could save and, not be broke again, and just make sure I can stack my account or something. Maybe it was like 6 or 7 years ago, but it felt like it was more recent, where it was like, okay, I can afford a hotel. I don't need to crash on someone's couch, all these different things. I wanted to acknowledge you, Rainn, for this beautiful conversation, for being open, vulnerable, real, authentic, just like we talked about before we started. I appreciate your realness. And I always, see your content from time to time, and, for me, I appreciate when someone who is extremely successful in their craft can open up about the different challenges and struggles and things that they've had to overcome. So I really appreciate that about you. I want people to get the book, Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution, and also make sure to check out the new show that's coming out, Geography of Bliss. And if they go to your Instagram and your website, they can see more updates about all this stuff and find out where to watch and how to get the book and all these different things.
Links,
handles, everything. We'll have it all up.
Hashtags.
Everything. Soulboom.com, Rainn Wilson everywhere as well. We'll have it all linked up for you guys. Is there anything else we should send people to directly for you?
And that's all good. That's it. Yeah.
I asked you these two questions in the previous episode. You probably won't remember your answers. I have them up in front of me, so I'm going to cheat.
Oh my God.
And see if you match these two responses. It's been 6 years now, so there might be a different response to these two questions. The first one is called the 3 truths. So imagine a hypothetical scenario. You get to live as long as you want, but eventually it's your last day on this earth. And you get to create, accomplish, be, do all the things you want to do from this moment until then. But for whatever reason in this hypothetical scenario, you've got to take all of your work with you. So no one has access to this book or any podcast you've ever done or any interview. It's all goes somewhere else, hypothetical. But you get to leave behind 3 truths that you've learned throughout your life, 3 lessons that you'd share with the world. What would be those 3 truths for you that you'd share?
Well, one is the one we started with, which is, what's something that I know for sure? I know for sure that I'm a spiritual being, having a human experience. I would say another truth is that storytelling is one of the most powerful forces on planet Earth. Humans need to storytell. We thrive when we tell stories. And by this, I mean, write poems, make movies, tell our stories, share our personal details, connect with people, talk. You can do it professionally. You can be a professional storyteller, in film and television and theater or in fiction. And you could do it in your daily life. But that is one of the most powerful and important forces. And I would say, too, the other thing is we need more joy and hope in the world. And one of the greatest services that we can ever give to people is to bring them joy and bring them hope. And that's where the work lies.
Beautiful. Well, if people want to know what the previous 3 truths are, make sure you check out the other episode. We'll link it up so you can see.
Ooh, you're not going to tell them?
We can see where they differ or where they're the same. This is the final question for you. What is your definition of greatness?
I believe in God, so I believe that God has given me talents, certain talents and faculties. And greatness is me maximizing my God-given talents and faculties. So I learned a lot about this when I realized, I have the ability to make people laugh. I'm kind of goofy. I'm kind of weird looking, a good sense of humor, good timing. I can use language. Let me use all of those skills to try and make people laugh. And that worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well for me. But we all have to find what that skill set is that gives us the most, deepest, richest satisfaction and apply it. My life before the office was one of incredible struggle just to survive.
All the way up until the office, because you'd done a bunch of TV and movie before then, right?
The few years before the office, I was making a little bit more money.
Yeah.
I would do a pilot here, a little movie part there. But